tongue, grief we go, gotta learn to let it go.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Welcome back to Wake the F Up podcast. I'm your host, Alix Long, and today we have a truly extraordinary guest with us. Carolyn Moor is the founder and president of the Modern Widows Club, a nonprofit organization that empowers widows to move beyond grief and thrive. With over 2 decades of experience in mentoring and leading widows, Carolyn is also a TEDx speaker, a podcast host, and the author of 3 books. And she's been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Her dedication to widow advocacy has sparked a movement of support and empowerment for women worldwide. Carolyn, welcome so much to the show. We are so excited to have you. You are literally kind of my widow hero. I've actually been not only a patron of yours, but I now feel as though like I emulate a lot of your work when I'm working with other widows. So welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you. You're part of the Wisterhood. We call it the Wister Widow Sister.
I definitely am.
Right?
And it's a proud group to be in. So for those widows listening, Carolyn's website is, vast. It is vast. It has every facet of any point of healing. Wherever you are on your healing journey as a widow, you will find some group, some support, information. She's got kind of just everything you could possibly need. So I'm so excited to get, diving in a little bit about your journey from personal loss to becoming this advocate. So maybe just tell the listeners a little bit about your backstory. How did you get here?
Well, I really do feel like widowhood, it is the beginning of a new life. The life I had before that moment really died along with Chad. But that life before widowhood was really as optimal as I had was a nurse in my 20s. Then I became an interior designer, which was my dream. Met him. He was an interior architect. It was a match made in heaven, really. It was just like the whole design world opened up to us, and we worked together. We built a company together, and we were out for Valentine's Day, just like any normal couple might do. And on the way home, a hit and run driver crashed into our car, caused us to spin out of control. And the light pole that we hit on the side of the road came down, hit his side of the car, and caused severe head trauma. And I walked away from that accident, still alive, with a 2 and 4-year-old daughters, a company, and a complete, my entire life imploded. I had no idea what my future was going to be, professionally or personally or as a parent. And it changed in a second without me knowing. Yeah.
In that shattering, which I
Yes.
think every widow who's listening or any support person who maybe knows someone who's had a massive loss like this, what was your first step post shattering? Because there is so many when your life is quickly wrecked like that in a sudden death. I think as a cancer caregiver and widow of a cancer survivor or loser or whatever, I don't even know how we say these terms are so random, but I had a little bit more time to sort of think through what was happening. But in your shattering case, what was your first steps to putting yourself back together is a weird way, but back together?
Well, because he had severe head trauma, I was able to, I knew that he could probably still hear me. And there were some promises that I made to him. You having been a nurse in my 20s and like you having nursing experience, I could read the machines. And that was both a curse and a blessing. So I knew where we were headed. And so I had made a promise to him to first, and just, you don't know where this comes from. These are the last moments. And I said, I will keep my daughters first and foremost in all the things that I do. I knew that would be the number one thing that he would care about. How are we going to raise this 2 and 4-year-old daughters that he loves so much? Second was that I was always honor the name that I carry, which is his last name, our last name. And the third was to find a way to find love again. And I realized that was the hardest one, and I
Mhm.
didn't realize how broad love was, really. I think widowhood opened me up to the broadness of love, and that was a surprise. But the beginning was always focused on my kids. It really wasn't focused on me. I didn't know how to do me. I didn't
Yeah.
know who I was. So it was easiest to focus on my daughters, and that's what I did. I knew, because of my background in understanding child development, that under the age of 7, experiencing what they call the ACEs, a traumatic life experience, was going to impact them. And so I had to figure out some way to counterbalance that. And I sought out to do that and accomplished most of it until it became
What
teenagers.
It's really powerful what you just said because I think I did the exact same thing. Like I knew from the moment that Carl had stage 4 cancer, I had a less than 1-year-old and a 2 almost 3-year-old.
Mhm.
Same. I got them in therapy. I fought like hell to give them as many resources as possible, knowing that a crash was coming and I had
Mhm.
no clue when. But I was also thinking was interesting that you said was I made some of those quiet promises as well that I would
Mhm.
use be make sure that my greatest legacy to Carl would be to love and give my kids everything I had inside of me. And it's interesting, there is some truth in that, right? Like we have to do that to survive or like feel like we can grab some control of this terribleness that's brought upon them. However, when you said that, it was interesting. I dove into it because it was way easier than actually looking inside of this shattered me who I'm like, my last name no longer has the same meaning. My home is different. The way I drink my coffee, I always laugh. I said even the way I drink coffee changed. Like everything changed in my life in a moment as it did for you. And so how long did it take you to shift your focus? Like, right, it's easy to put it into our children because we can do that very easily because we love them so much. But like how did you
Yes.
go inside of you and work on that loving piece?
I think probably around somewhere between year 2 and 3.
Hmm.
If I really look back, because I honestly, I don't remember much about year 1. Um, I think that the anniversary came around and I went, what?" And I think so the second year I started looking at who who do I want to be, right?
Yeah.
Because now there's this opportunity to go who and still honor this legacy. I didn't know at that time this what I say now is I was a woman of fulfilled marriage vows, promise made, promise kept, promise honored. So I had entered into the promise honored stage, but I didn't have language for it. And that's why I like to share those types of quotes because it resonates so much when you're actually able to put it into a short form like that. But I think, I bought a treadmill. I was going into age 40. So I was like, I need to look good and feel good and have the energy to do this with these kids. And
Movement is crucial in healing. It's crucial.
right, right. So before I knew that I would launch a women's health organization for widows, I became the beta tester of it
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, right? What did I do? Well, I focused. I got up every morning before the girls got up. I worked out before that. I couldn't leave the house. So I had a
Mhm.
treadmill and I had, I made it so that I could create a healthy life. I refused to have any alcohol in the house, so I could drown my sorrows. I mean, there's choices that you can make that steer you in that direction because there's a lot of unhealthy choices that are made in widowhood, and there's no judgment there. It's just that it's not going to set you on the same trajectory as making healthy choices. And that's all there is. And that's it. That's what our entire organization about is. If you want to go the healthy pathway, we're your organization. And here's how others are doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it is a good point. It's very hard to feel all that pain and not want to numb it in some capacity. And even what you're saying when you give outward to your children, if we're honest as widows, that can be sort of a shield to
Mhm.
not have to feel as well. So it's like finding that deeper balance between listening and really owning what just happened to us and feeling the loss. I mean, shit, that can take a long time, right?
Yeah,
Tell
well,
me,
actually interesting that you say that because the research shows 5 years, somewhere
yeah.
between 5 to 7 years, and having watched widows for now 25 years, in sort of an organization capacity, but our research actually backed that. So I was
Yeah,
just like, oh, now this is valuable content to let
that
ladies
is
know,
valuable.
give yourself a break because that first 2, 3, 4, those are those are rebuilding years. You're like a
Mhm.
baby that is going to crawl, stand, walk, and in between there, we're gonna be that TikTok baby that, like, gets mad because she can't have what she wants. It's like, "Ah," the baby cries. I don't know if you've seen that TikTok.
I
And I'm like,
have.
I feel like that baby sometimes. I want this, and it's like, "No,
Right.
no,
Like, "Ah,
no."
I know." You're, like, laughing and crying all at the same time, that we are that baby. And actually, like, that doesn't go away. I think I cry every single day. I've cried I don't know that I'll ever stop crying every single day. There's always something. It's a joy cry, a
Yeah,
sad cry,
exactly.
like, you just feel so much. I think that's an
Yep.
interesting piece of the shattering. So even though we're like, "Oh, yeah, we have to create a whole new version of ourselves," and those pieces that shattered, we can't put them back together the same way, but that wide open feeling, at least I'm assuming for you and for me, has not gone away, where I just feel everything even more intently. And I've always been kind of a feeler, but man, I the joy, the gratitude, along with the sorrow and the grief,
Mhm,
are very poignant in our life. Well, so talk to me a little bit about the Modern Widows Club. You've created this beautiful space for widows to heal and grow. Talk to me
mhm.
about like peer support for women in the widow world. How important, and what have you observed in creating these spaces for community for women who've just lost their person?
I think it's the safest, least judgmental place that a widow can place herself in, especially in our organization because we do not. There's women of all ages, all faith backgrounds. You're here because you are grieving or have grieved, and you're looking for personal growth. And I think that's what's so uniquely different about us. We aren't focused on the grief. We're not focused on the distress, which is negative stress. We're actually focused on the eustress, which is positive stress. So it's not like we're not going to challenge you or we're going to ask you to get out of your comfort zone. We are, but we're going to do it with a lot of support around you. And so that's what I realized, that in the beginning, people are like, oh, that's so great. You're a grief support. No, we're actually not. We're actually
Mm-hmm.
personal growth support for women. And I realized that most people don't even know that it needs to exist or but I realize this is I'm not going to stay in grief support groups. That's for a certain amount of time and it's needed and it's well attended, but we show that only 50% of our ladies get grief support. So some of these
Right.
ladies are coming to us right away, and so that's why we have a hope program. That's why we started realizing women are coming to us in different stages of widowhood, but nobody
Mm-hmm.
had identified that before. And so, from a lot of our research, we said people are coming to us in hope, either heal, grow, or lead. So,
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. And we created this tool, this widow empowerment quiz, so that you as a woman could come to our site, take that short little 10-minute quiz, and you determine where you are based on your questions. I can't determine that for you. And it's so awesome because they'll do that quiz and then they'll do it again a year later and they actually see whatever it was that you did, our programs, your own, searching for optimal personal growth and health. You did something because you advanced. And so the
Yeah.
goal is, but if you go backwards, then you have to ask yourself, what did I do? It's really about the accountability of your own choices in widowhood. And I love that because that's why we have so many choices, because someone who wants to come to our relationship building and dating is not going to be someone who's probably in hope, right?
Right.
That person's maybe gonna go to the parenting support club, or maybe a soft entry is the book club,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get the ladies who are in grow and lead, and they're like, "Let's travel,"
I love the travel. I'm like,
right?
that's so cool.
So I was like, "Wait a minute, we have to support ladies all the way from grasping, like, grappling with hopelessness and hopefulness, those widows, all the way to I want to step up and go advocate and become a leader. We need to serve them in all of those stages in one place where they can see their own self come into this, what we call transmuting into something more beautiful than even before. That was a higher calling, but I didn't know how to do that. But
It's
now
hard.
we really get it, and it's all because of the research we've done. Thousands and thousands of widows have told us what is happening in their life and what helped them. Um, and and I think the research is alone, what our organization is doing is revolutionary, because
Yeah.
our voices are in the end product.
Hmm. Tell me, with the research, what have you found that women need to get out of the hope stage and get more towards the growth and then leadership stage, where they're being more of like the empowerment phase of healing?
I can tell you that widows are always, typically when they come to us, they are in the emotional and mental phase, and they're in financial health phase. Those
Mhm.
two, are battling with each other. As time rolls on, they get more into like their relational health. They start looking
Mhm.
around. Maybe they look for new relationships. Maybe they lost some relationships, and physical health. There is a serious health impact. Widowhood is the number one most stressful life event. You're adding 100 stress points. And so physical, how you think about your life and how you secure you feel in life, financial health, impacts your physical health. I
Mhm.
can tell you, I just stopped eating. I was
Yeah.
not nourishing my body, and I didn't realize that I was dwindling away. Then I didn't have the strength, physical health, to do what I needed to for my daughters. Then comes spiritual health. Then people start realizing, wait, this is a spiritual journey, and what do I believe now? And so then
Yeah.
there's that. And then widows start realizing, I need some kind of recreational health. So that's why we have the book club and the travel club, because now women are looking, their viewpoint is opening up a little bit as they're opening up, right? As
Mhm.
what's happening. And ultimately, like with you and like with me, ultimately every widow in this new rebirth, which is what it,
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
want to find purpose and meaning. What does all this mean into the broad landscape of my life? They hopefully find that in our organization through the maze that is unique to everyone. Um, and that's what I think is so beautiful, this collection of all these stories and all these journeys emerging and aligning with one another.
Do you find with yourself and then with these thousands of women that you've witnessed and held space for, that love is crucial to get, I don't wanna say the other side of grief, but the to where you're assimilating your grief and you're able to live again? Do you find that self-love and love of other, like reaching out, maybe creating relationships, is crucial to that?
Love is the only answer to get through. That I'll go so far as to say that, um, because honestly, the love of my daughters got me up in the morning.
That's
Then
right.
I adopted a cat, and I'm like, "I'm not gonna love you," and then I fell in love with her, and then she died, and I was just like crushed, right? But I
Mm-mm.
had to do that before I could love a person, right? It was a
Right.
little bit, but I also had to love my career. I had to relearn how to do interior design without my husband.
I
And then
know.
then the self-love started to come from me because I was proud of myself. I was proud of
Mhm.
myself for making it through a day, through a week, through a year, doing new things that I never thought that I was, unplugging the computer and putting it all back together. These are very real decisions to make around the household,
Right.
in insurance for my family, so many things. And once you get some of those things under your belt, I mean, you start feeling a
I
lot
can do
of
this.
empowerment, and then you wanna do something with it. So love is the golden thread through everything. I absolutely love what I do with Modern Widows Club, which is now the Movement for Widow Care, which is now, has expanded with my own, like, awareness and knowledge, from listening to women to see what happens over a span of time. And so love is the only thing that is going to motivate you. It is the number one reason why people become long-term resilient. And that's science. Yeah.
Yeah. So my whole company is founded on the idea that love heals loss, and I believe so strongly in it. And love can be so different for all of us, but it's really beautiful to think about the different kinds of love and the different how those move us along the different stages of our healing and grieving. And it's really cool because love has lots of forms. So
Well, I
I
think
love
I had a limited viewpoint, to be honest with you, of love.
I think I did too.
And then I'm like, "What?" It's like, you can love, several children in a different way, but this was humanity. I mean,
Right.
it's become that big for me. I, look at my human story of being an overcomer, having walked away from a car accident that I could have died in, and I
Mhm.
had survivor's guilt for so long and PTSD. And I was parenting and waking up and taking care of kids, and no one could see the trauma and how it
Yeah.
manifested itself. How, you know, I had suicidal thoughts. There was no
Yes.
one there to stop that. And
No.
I do feel like having such a great upbringing as a child in very rural Arkansas, um, where you have community and you just get things done, like you just figure things out. I had a wonderful childhood that really positioned me well for this, because my parents were like, "Do not expect other people to do the things that you should be doing in the world for yourself." And I was like, oh, this is what they were training me for.
It takes a lot of grit to get through what you've witnessed, and you're right, like, there is constantly an internal and external battle where internally I had a my grief therapist told me, she's like, it would be weird if you didn't have suicidal ideations at this in this journey. It is much easier to die, I mean, than it is to walk this walk,
Mhm.
right?
It
Like,
is.
dying seems like an easy path at this point, like, to be a single mom who shattered your whole life and then get your pants back on, raise your kids, figure out how to raise your family financially and every other facet and figure out who you are. It's really
And
hard.
ultimately, it is truly a look into your own soul,
Yeah.
and who were you brought here to become? And are you brave enough to do what it takes to discover what that is? Because you're going to do it in multiple layers. Yeah.
The thing that I've been kind of chewing on, I've been deep in actually like somatic trauma clearing personally. At this phase, I'm feeling like in the safest zone I've ever been, where I'm really diving into some of the pain that I don't know that I had the capacity to fully look at all of it. And so you've been doing this journey much longer than me. I was wondering, when you look backwards at the you before your husband died, and you're sitting in the body of the you of the now,
Hmm.
how do you grapple with those two versions of yourself that to me it feels so different? When I look back sometimes lately, I've been having, I don't know if it's regret, but it's definitely just like this awareness that the me of the then was we kind of talked about this pre-show. It had all these protective layers of hiding, and I was young and unable to be my full self.
Hmm.
I was wondering if you would share a little bit of if like you have that similar experience, to maybe give the widows out there some time to say like it's normal to be in love with the person that you lost forever, but it's
Hmm.
also feels normal to me to say when I died when that person died, and you said that already without me even prompting it,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of glad that that person of me is dead, because I don't want to go back to that person. I love the resilient person I am today. I wish I was this person loving back then,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Do you feel
Right.
that way ever?
Yes, because the before me thought I knew so much more about life than I actually did. But then widowhood is a refinement. It just gets rid of all the bullshit,
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? And there's no other way to really say it, is that I was bullshitting myself before. In widowhood, you don't get that luxury.
No,
It is a
it is a
luxury,
luxury.
okay, to fool yourself into, "This is really who I am on Instagram," or whatever. Um, in widowhood, there is no time for that, because
Mm-mm.
you are directly faced with who you are everywhere you go, every time you go outside, every time you look in the mirror, every time you wake up, your mind never shuts down, you can't sleep, you're all constantly. And so I really do believe that my intuition and my trust in myself became my authentic self started when I became widowed.
Heck yeah. I talk about
Because
this all the time because don't you feel like you have to learn to trust yourself in the
absolutely.
most authentic way, because there is no one that's gonna pull you out of this depth, the
Well,
darkness. Not
and
your kids, not your friends,
nope.
nobody.
Well, and I will tell you, when I was on Shalom in the Home on TLC in 2000, oh my gosh, it's been 10 years, and then
Mhm.
Oprah. So you go on Oprah, and she's like, "You're like an everyday hero who didn't know it. Like you're like a neighborhood hero."
Awesome.
I was in shock being on that show. Now, did I wanna represent widows well? Damn right, okay?
Right?
I knew that we were badass. I just didn't, I don't wanna be, arrogant about it or anything, but I'm like, "You should see everything I've done in the last 6 years." But did I think I was like them? Like they were describing me, an amazing mother, someone who helps others. And so I had to come back from Oprah and go, do you believe you are the things that they said you are? And that
Oh, yeah.
was when a whole nother level became, are you really the hero of your own story? If you were, what would you what would you be doing? And that was really, Oprah said, do something with the pain. Your story is very powerful. She also told my daughters, girls, grow up and be smart girls because smart girls change the world. And I was
It's
just
so
like,
true.
I think she's saying this to me too.
It's true.
And
It's true, and you have done great things with your pain, but I think that's so interesting is, like, we can do all this, what appears to be greatness, but we have to really learn to first trust ourselves that we can do anything great after that terribleness, but then love yourself enough to believe, right, that I should be proud of myself. I need to love myself in this hardship, and then I'm worthy of love and all the goodness in this
Mhm.
world. There is a survivor guilt where you're like, and I think the external world is so uncomfortable with
Yeah.
transition post loss that they don't know how to deal with you at all. They're like, if you fall in love, they're upset with you. If you don't fall in love, they're sad for you. It's like wherever you go, you don't fit in. And so you have
Well,
to fit in with yourself, right?
and new relationships actually test you more than anything, right?
Shit,
Because
I know.
now you have someone looking at you and I'm going, I would go on dates and he'd go, "Oh, is that what you're wearing?" And I'm like, my spouse would never have said that.
Right, right.
And I'm like, "I look good." Okay? Now you're defending who you are now. And then the
That's
more
right.
you and in that process, sometimes we become too masculine. Sometimes
Mhm.
we become too, so I've had to do that super masculine, to
Mhm.
survive and come back to femininity and, be
It's really hard actually, because when you're in charge of your whole family, it takes a lot of masculine energy to run your
yes,
home,
it
and then
does.
you to be a feminine and let someone new maybe take care of you in any sort of way. You're like, I don't
Mhm.
know if I trust that again. And choosing marriage again, although I dove just because my heart, I followed my heart way more. If I listened to my head, I'd never do anything. And now I often think about the fact that I am so open and working on the trust and rebuilding this beautiful love that feels so authentic to me, but that I will again most likely have to deal with another spousal death. And I'm like, the idea that we can't escape it no matter where
No.
we are. Death is always going to be a part of our life, and it's really brave to get back in there.
It really is. It's the ultimate, I think it's the ultimate self-expression to genuinely love someone again, at that level. And it ends up being it's never the same as it was before, and that's the multifacetedness of love, and that's why I think widowhood is such a spiritual journey, because we're going to talk about self-love. We also have to have a love of something greater than ourself,
Mhm.
and that comes into play, and that also comes into the trust factor and the intuition, getting quiet enough to say, what is it that I really need to decide here? And for some
Mhm.
people that's prayer, and some people it's affirmations. And I've really studied a lot of different, backgrounds of spirituality, and ultimately they all come back to the same thing: is, do I believe this? Do I trust this? Am I willing to follow this? And does it intuitively feel right? It Only you can answer that.
Yeah, and that's why we do a lot of somatic work in my company. It's like the
Mhm.
getting quiet and going inside and really feeling the embodiment of your own intuition. Some would call that spirituality and God.
Mhm.
And I think there's many names for it, but it is that you have to go to the inside and push away the outside noise for a while in order to get centered and get to that authentic space where you can say, this is who I'm going to be now.
Right.
Um, it's really cool. So, talk to me a little bit about your vision for the future of widow support. I think you've been transforming this widow space for quite some time. What do you really envision the future to look like for to have better support for women, for families that are in widowdom?
Well, this year we actually studied what Denmark does with widowed women, and
Mm,
it's really encouraged me that when you become widowed, you're automatically integrated into the mental health programs and systems. There's not a question whether you should be there or not. I think that what's happening here in the U.S., I really I don't know what to expect. But
mm.
I know that, mental health has not really recognized women in widowhood. Widowhood in general is in its own inclusion cause that has been unidentified because it is not actually included in much research or any of those categories. Most of the federal programs, Department of Children and Families, Department of Health and Human Services, they literally do not even talk about widowed people. And there are more widowed women. And so it is a greater women's health cause that simply even women's caucuses and women's initiatives aren't recognizing. We follow along something called the Healthy People 2030, which is through the Department of Health and Human Services and the um, the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, partly because our programs, this is their sentence, create social, physical, and economic environments that promote attaining the full potential for health and well-being for all. And
For all.
so our category just happens to be women who are widowed. And part of the problem was we need to be recognized in two major categories: survivors.
Mhm.
So right now, if you say, "Are you part of a survivor program?" Widowhood is not included. You either are domestic violence or you are human trafficking. That's it
Hmm.
for women. We also are not included in what's called at-risk populations, or sometimes they call it vulnerable populations. Widowhood is not recognized in those categories, and so we've got a lot of pre-work to do to be included, simply
Yeah.
be included. And our organization is really proving that, because if I asked any widow who did our quiz and she's in hope, she would feel vulnerable. She would feel like she's a survivor, and she would feel at risk in many
Yeah.
ways we're not going to talk about on this chat. But we should be included in all those. And when I started identifying, I first, as an advocate, went looking for where we belong. And then I realized after a decade, we don't have anywhere to belong. Then I started identifying where we should belong, and slowly but surely talking to the people that can actually give us that inclusion. So the Modern Widows Club, has identified, by bringing a large database of widows together, that we can be now a community of research. Before, people would not do research on widows because they didn't have a database, they didn't have a demographic. Well, we knocked that door down, and we have done research with the Washington University in St. Louis,
Mm.
and lots of other people who we do master's programs and research with. But the research and the funding will then fuel the future of widow support. And it's going to be an ongoing process because I have daughters, and you have daughters, right?
I do.
This is a generational shift. We are more exposed to what's available around the world and seeing what people are doing. And the U.S. has some work to do when it comes to widows, and we have to demand it. And so we're starting to really take the research and state the facts.
Mhm.
And I think that was not around. I was just one small voice saying, hey, I need support after I leave grief support. Where is that? But what I didn't know is there were millions and millions. Every 2 minutes, a woman becomes widowed in the United States. So that's more than domestic violence. That's more than human trafficking. And a million women become widowed every year in the United States.
Wow.
And I don't understand how such a large demographic, such a big voting demographic,
Right.
could be ignored if we started having a collective voice.
Well, and I
Uh,
love that you're saying that. I mean, because you said there is no place that we actually belong, and that could not speak more to everyone who's listening, who's a widow's nervous system, right? In your body,
yeah,
you can feel that. Like the minute you become a widow, you don't really belong anywhere to anyone but yourself, and that's I think why we get so internally empowered. But to have women like you who are advocating for us on a research level, and shout out to Washington University. I was born in St. Louis, so it's a great school to them who are any of the universities that are taking these studies seriously, because these are some strong women and we are alone and do need resources. And
mhm,
it's interesting. Remember I do a lot of work in New York, and I was in New York at one point seeing a person who was definitely in a struggle, potentially schizophrenic, potentially homeless, and everybody was dismissive of this person, thinking this, that, and the other. And internally, I got teary, thinking to myself, that could have been me.
yeah,
Like anytime I see a person who is homeless or endangered in any sort of way and struggling with this vulnerable population, I'm like, that is me. I was like 1 second away from, because you feel so vulnerable in that beginning
you are.
stages and you have no resources and everything's ripped from you. It's like you could become an alcoholic, you
Yeah,
could become homeless, you could become a mother who can't keep her shit together. And like you relate immediately with how people get into those spaces, no
absolutely.
matter what your support system is.
It's a lot of people know the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You go
Mhm.
from self-actualization to where am I going to live?
Right.
How am I going to eat? I mean, it's a toppling down to the bottom, and how am I going to get back up? Right.
Right.
Our research shows we all talk a lot about solving problems and innovating solutions with successful outcomes and impact. As a nonprofit, I have to prove those things, right? There's a lot of people doing work, but we wanted to prove it so that we could get people interested in research. 60 Over 60% of our ladies literally had these are just examples of routine things. To anyone who's listening to this will be like, oh, I do these things. They have
Right.
difficulty with these things: paying bills,
Mhm.
cleaning, laundry,
Mhm.
cooking, caring for their children. um, 60% have a issue doing those day-to-day tasks because they're literally overwhelmed. And what we found in our research is that when women come into our organization, they felt a 90% decrease in overwhelm, depression, sleep deprivation, because now they have knowledge, and
Mhm.
indecision. Can't make decisions in the beginning, and you have to make hundreds of decisions the moment you become widowed. And so what we found is when we actually get ladies the support that they say that they need, not what's offered to them by some program that isn't studying widows, but actually studies widows. They said before and after our programs, they felt 4 times more confidence, sense of purpose, interest in their future, and happiness. So I
Wow.
think we can say we would rather have widows in that second category than in that first category. And if we did that for 300,000 widows around the world, those women would be changing the dynamic of every country. That's how
Yeah,
powerful we actually are. Isn't
it's
that cool?
true. It's true. It's really cool, and I love research. I'm, like, kind of a research nerd, so it's amazing to hear those numbers and to hear the turnaround that's happening within your organization. So, listeners out there, obviously pour your resources into this nonprofit and please support, Caroline best you can. So, I did wanna ask you, as we're coming up on Valentine's Day, I think your episode will probably air potentially the week of, if not the week
Mhm.
after. Talk to me a little bit about the Carolyn of today versus the Carolyn back then. How do you do Valentine's Day now? You know, my husband David, who's usually my co-host,
Uh-huh.
um, he lost his wife on Valentine's Day, and it's a really tough holiday, especially if you've lost a person on it. Talk to me a little bit about you today versus you back then. How have you evolved?
Well, before we were talking about how life turns into this like spiritual threesome, that might be with a person, that might be with a cause, that might be, but the person never leaves the stratosphere of whatever it is that you do. And I actually, because my husband was an organ donor, and there was a gentleman who received his real heart on Valentine's Day, and so I always go and give blood. It's a way
Mhm.
for me to honor, and now it has turned into women in our organization going to give blood too on that day. And
Yeah.
what I didn't know is Valentine's Day is the slowest day at most blood banks. I don't know why.
Aw.
And so I was just like, oh, that's so interesting, but it was almost like meant to be. And so it's just another way for me to go, Chad saved people's lives, and I believe in that. And by doing this, I am continuing on his legacy that has become my legacy, that has become many people's legacy, and that ripple effect of just love. The
Yeah.
love just continues on, and that's just one example that we all can do something on that day that would be, we can choose for it to be extremely emotional, or we can choose for it to be extremely loving and giving back. And the giving
Mhm.
back part is the greatest healing choice and element that you can actually make.
I love to hear you say that because I think that is true. There's a lot of choice in the further out you get from the onset of the grief
Mm.
or the loss. And I think the choice to make it loving, the choice to make it full of joy, you will always have the sadness within. But a
Mm.
lot of times people will ask me, how does David do Valentine's Day? And I remember that I was really tiptoeing around giving my stepchildren presents that day or like tokens of love in the early days. And now I just shower them with love because I thought to myself, it's a choice, right, to love, and they deserve to be showered with love on that day. And they will always sit with their sadness on that day, as
Mhm.
will all of us in our loss, right? And that's the educating piece to the world out there that doesn't understand widowdom or loss in significant nature, is that we will always carry our deepest pain, and it holds hands with the greatest joy and the hope for the future. And that's what you're doing. You're
Mhm.
empowering women to claim love in their life. And I think, congratulations to you, because on day one, you told your husband before he passed that you were going to do these three things, and you're doing all of them and doing them really well. And you should be so proud of yourself. And I hope that you of today, sitting in this seat, believes that you've done all of that, just like Oprah Winfrey challenged you. I'm like, only Oprah could make you be like, fuck, am I really believing I'm as good as I am? But you
Well,
are. It's
well,
amazing.
she made me realize there are promises that we make. I wasn't just making a promise to him, I was making a promise to myself. And
That's
when we
right.
break the promises to ourselves is when we have the most regret. So if you make a promise to yourself, keep it, and it'll bring you joy.
Well, any closing thoughts? I mean, your work is truly changing lives and it's transformative. And I'm just honored to have this time to talk to you and share your story and your voice and your nonprofit with the world. Listeners will have so many of her resources in the show notes, so you can find everything Carolyn's doing. It's just incredible. Do you have anything you want to close with?
I think it's important for everyone to understand that there is a future that you may not have envisioned for yourself. I'm
Hmm.
a living example of that every day, and that's really what I wish someone would have told me in the beginning, that you have a future that you can't not even envision, but it's
Yeah.
coming. It's coming, and people will come along in your pathway, and it's you needing to recognize the importance of why that person came into your life, and and embrace it. Yeah.
Yep. Well, your work is changing lives, and we're so grateful for the impact that you're making. I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, vision with us today.
Thank you.
Listeners out there, if you want to learn more about Carolyn's work, hop on the internet, modernwidowsclub.org, and just check out. She's got multiple books. All of her resources are listed there, but we'll also connect everything in the show notes. I also think really cool your 365 daily wisdom empowerment for widows. That's a really cool maybe starting point for a lot of you out there. So I'll have
Yeah.
some links to her books in there. It's just like a little bit of daily wisdom, but jump on if you want to travel and you're a widow, if you want to date again and work on relationships. She's literally got like everything. I think I'm gonna get back on there. Maybe I'll travel a little bit more with some
Oh, we have
widows.
a health and wellness community now for people. Like I have to do like 100 jumping jacks. I have to eat 30 like real
Oh
food.
God. I need
I
that
love
one
it.
too. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
And
you.
you are just such a gem. The world is really lucky to have your story and you looking out for widows out there. So
Thank you.
we're going to keep watching you and hopefully you can come back and talk to us again. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.